Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line.
and joining us today is our special guest. Hello, Brandon Graham. How are you doing?
Gentlemen, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Uh,
Yes.
so, so we're actually recording this on the 8th, March 8th, and today we got the news that Akira Toriyama passed away. I guess 6 days ago, and we were already planned on recording. I won't even tell you what we were planning on recording today instead of this, but it seemed it seemed worth talking about Akira Toriyama, and specifically because I know that me and Brandon both have a long-standing relationship with his work, and I I think that he's a figure that's so interesting and so big in a certain segment of the market. We are not going to say anything that somebody who is a hyper fan of his is not going to know, right? But on the other hand, the sort of space that we occupy in, like the comics YouTube, I don't know if those people are really going to respond to him in the same kind of way. But to me, it's like, you know, I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic. He's like the it's like Japanese Jack Kirby died, and all of the things that might kind of entail. You said Jack Kirby in 1984, and you have a whole industry that he built that would have been like, oh, Jack Kirby, right? Because he's so ubiquitous and he's so influential that like you feel like you know him without even like getting him. And I think that Toriyama had a certain aspect of it, of that. He was so popular and his stuff is so influential that it's almost like you can't really quite look at the peak popularity stuff and really see it anymore. So I think that
Sure.
that's kind of worth looking at from this perspective, with the perspective of like not the super fan, not going to give you a biographical portrait of the man right now, but rather sort of like, you know, what he left us.
Yeah, and he was so productive, and it's such different. Like his work changed so much, and I think before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about how the industry changed because of his work.
Right.
But yeah, like I feel like as soon as you're talking about like a super fan, I was thinking like he's an interesting artist in that I was comparing him when we were texting. I was comparing him to Masamune Shirow's like Dragon Ball Z is kind of his Ghost in the Shell, where it's the thing of his that's most uh commercially successful, but not the thing that I connected with.
Right.
Yeah, totally. And the same way, I think early Dragon Ball and Doctor Slump. I have some of the Doctor Slump manga with me here. Um, and that also affected things. Something really fascinating about Doctor Slump, I don't think he gets enough credit for, is I think that this is the aesthetic that all the Mario Brothers stuff came from.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Straight from there. Yeah. So Doctor Slump was his first long form serial, and it actually ran for like 4 or 5 years. I believe it's like 1981 to 85 or 80 to 84, something like that.
Yeah, I think
And
something needed for.
yeah, hugely influential. And just like Dragon Ball, it was in Weekly Shonen Jump, and didn't look anything like anything else that was coming out at the time. Like his stylization is like similar to some of the boys comic artists from the late 60s and early 70s, but his actual like surface and the way he drew and the way he designed, I mean, just didn't seem like anything else at all. And it's so friggin' funny.
Yeah, and he
Uh,
did these things where he kind of pushed things in directions you really don't expect. I remember kind of two stories come to mind. There's one really fun one where they have a pair of glasses that allow you to see who you're looking at in the future. And so it has this all these horrible scenes where like there's a character who like looks at a baby and sees that she's going to be a beautiful woman in 15 years or whatever, and then is trying to get her phone number. And so they're doing all
Falls
these
in love
jokes
with
like
her.
that. And then eventually, like Dr. Slump looks himself in the mirror and he realizes he's going to be bald, so he immediately goes out and buys all his hair tonic and everything. Um, and it ends by turning the glasses and looking at the viewer and being like, "Oh no!" And then the last spread is just a skeleton reading the comic book. Like, you're gonna die. It's amazing. And
Oh,
the other one I was thinking about that is really fun is if I'm remembering right, they create a device that makes copies of everything, and the main characters are such menaces that they end up ripping the comic page they're on and putting it in the device, and then they find the universe and they put that in there. They're just basically trying to destroy time and space.
well, I need to go. I need to go read this stuff then because I am only familiar with him through my students for the most part, who they come in as Dragon Ball Z fans, and they're watching it on their phone, and they're talking about all the power-ups and stuff. And then his style has become so ubiquitous amongst them and how they draw, how they design their characters, that yeah, but then I'll be like, man, I don't know, I don't really want to read that. And then people like you guys will be like, well, you need to read Dragon Ball, and they'll tell me, no, you need to read Dragon Ball Z.
Sure.
Like, that's the cool
Definitely
stuff.
for different audiences.
Yeah, and you know, this is another thing we talked about just shortly before the call, but what the thing that made Weekly Shonen Jump the biggest magazine, I mean, possibly the biggest magazine in the world. I mean, God knows if there was another magazine that was consistently selling, you know, millions of copies an issue. But the thing that made it so wildly successful was these reader surveys that they would do, and the editors would literally hire and fire and extend and cancel things based on the reader survey cards that went into every week issue. And Toriyama was incredibly successful at responding to the things that people liked and responded to the things that people were interested in. I mean, Dr. Slump was not supposed to be a serial that ran for 4 years with four times 54 weekly installments, right? It is something that is, you know, he tossed out and gave him the sort of juice, you know, that he could connect to his wild imagination, and, you know, do what he did every week. But he changed so wildly. I mean, it essentially what he's done is taking the impulses that were in some of the sports comics of the 70s, the shonen boys sports comics of the 70s, where you know, the boy needs to train harder to get better. And you know, first you lift weights, and then you lift bigger weights, and then you get like this training device that has like gears and stuff, and then you get a robo body, and then you get this thing. You know, he took like those devices that were like really like devices of sports comics and kind of applied them to the thing that he was doing. And then eventually you kind of slough off the humor, and you slough off the weird scenarios, and you slough off the flexibility, and what you're left with is like an action comic, which is like so different from, you know, where he started from.
Yeah, and it really paved the way for the shonen stuff that we think of now, like the One Piece and the Naruto and everything, where it's like if you look at Dr. Slump, there's like none of that DNA in there almost.
Right.
Well, and I will say, without knowing hardly anything about it, when Tori's son Jack was here last summer, I bought the complete Dragon Ball Z, and we were going to do videos, and then he got ADHD, so we couldn't lock him down to videos. And but I did read like the first Naruto, the first One Piece, the first Dragon Ball Z, and I was very impressed with that story structure that I know must have started with Dragon Ball Z, which is, I want to be the best. And I thought, what a cool like thing that all my students love all these properties, where it's a story that follows someone struggle for 900 episodes or whatever to get better, versus like the standard American arc, which is, you know, we have a bad guy and we want to beat him and save the world. That's almost like a more egotistical way of looking at it than self-improvement journey.
Sure.
And that is very impressive to me. So I have those, and I will now start reading them in tribute.
Yeah,
I do think. What were we saying, Sean?
Oh, self-improvement, where you gather friends along the way from all of your fallen, all your fallen foes. You know.
Oh yeah, and that seems like it was definitely. My impression is it seems like that was Toriyama kind of going with like Vegeta becomes really popular, and they're like, well, let's bring him into the main cast now. But I do think Dragon Ball did it very differently than a lot of shonen manga does it since, because I mean, Goku's kind of, I know one of his big influence was Jackie Chan movies, and Jackie Chan is this, like he very much likes to like almost like simplify his characters, you know, like there's the manga City Hunter. Jackie Chan did a movie of it, and in City Hunter he's just a lech is his whole thing. But since Jackie Chan doesn't really have sexuality in his movies for the most part, he took that same personality trait and just made it the main character is really hungry the whole time. And that's kind of like almost how Goku works. He's just this very simple, a lot of the humor in early Dragon Ball is he's like never, like he's highly competent, but he's never seen the world. So like he meets Bulma for the first time, and he freaks out when he realizes she doesn't have a penis, which is, I often describe early Akira Toriyama comics is comics that are made for what kids actually want versus what their parents want them to read.
Right.
There's so much stuff in Dragon Ball that would get the book immediately banned if you explained it to people over here. Like a lot of it is based around like the female character shows up and it's just like, I'll let you see my underwear if you give me this magical Dragon Ball you have. And he's like, I don't want to look at your dirty underwear.
Right. Because he's a 7-year-old kid or whatever, Goku at the beginning. Right. And the entire humor is all based on that. Yeah. And then his shock at Bulma, like not having the same parts is like, that's, he's so friggin' funny. And it's kind of weird because I think he was such an entertainer. I think he traveled the path that was presented to him, but it's weird to me that somebody so funny ended up drawing, an action comic eventually, because of course, like, he had skills in so many different directions, including design, which is another one of those things where, somebody's like Akira Toriyama, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you're like, show somebody some of the designs from Chrono Trigger or Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, or any number of other video game properties that he was like directly responsible for.
When you said design, I was thinking immediately of how he draws vehicles as well. Like that's a really big part of the style that kind of went out of things with. It was making me think that I think humor is harder to do than other things in a lot of ways. So I almost wonder if so humor is harder to do, but it's taken less seriously. So I wonder if he's like just highly competent at humor, but then people wanted action more and more, and so he's like taken more seriously if his story is done more seriously, even though he's capable of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can't think of a mainstream cartoonist that was funnier than him, or say like Rumiko Takahashi, at the height of her powers. Like the two of them basically making some of the funniest comics that have ever been made simultaneously for competing magazines from like 1980 to 1988,
Yeah, totally. Because she was in Shonen Sunday, I think, at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She was in Shonen Jump. Yeah, and Takahashi, when you see her because she did a couple horror manga as well.
Right.
She has a great one that's about two people hunting mermaids.
Oh yeah, Mermaid Scar and Mermaids. Yeah, those are fantastic.
Yeah, and it's just deadly serious, and it's like people that it's really interesting to see that like tonal shift. And it's made me think, like, I know somebody was recommending recently the new Fantastic Four to me, and it was written by Ryan North, who I know just because he did this dinosaur comic. It was like a web comic, and I immediately was like, just the dinosaur comic guy is doing a Fantastic Four. But then it went in my brain of like, oh, but comedy is like, if somebody can do comedy, then they can probably do other things. And like Douglas Adams, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy guy, was showrunner on a bunch of the Doctor Who and did more serious stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and that makes sense, actually. Or someone like Louis C.K., who's a comedian, but when he leans into drama, it's like the most heart-wrenching stuff you've ever seen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, his Horace and Pete was fantastic.
Yeah, that stuff. Episode 3 of that. Anyways, off topic.
Yeah, I would. I don't know if somebody can look up this and screen share it real quick, but I would posit that the design of the slime in Dragon Quest is one of the most brilliant character designs of the decade that it appeared in.
And
it's
Toriyama.
Yeah, it's totally Toriyama. Yeah.
I mean, back to his influence on Mario. His influence on Mario Brothers stuff. I like specifically, like, there's the Mario 3 or something that has the Tanuki. Like, you put on a Tanuki costume, and there's literally a thing in Dr. Slump where they're just dressed as raccoons. Like, a couple years before that game came out.
There we go. Yeah.
Slime.
Oh, these things. Oh God, no, we don't want to get into that. That's
No.
what's
There's a
that
Studio
Pompoko
Ghibli
movie
Tanuki
from
cartoon.
Oh yeah,
Ghibli
sure.
is the strangest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, the one where because the Tanukis, one of the major things about them, because Japan is insane, is that they use their testicles a lot and are shape changers. So there's a
Yeah.
thing in a Studio Ghibli. It's not directly Miyazaki, but it's his studio, and they're all sitting around a rug. And at some point, the Tanuki mentions his testicles, and they're like, "Well, they're so big. Where are they?" And he's like, "You're sitting on them," and the rug they're all on just rolls up.
Yeah, it's a quite an amazing movie. They fly with the testicles, they smash cars and equipment with them. Yeah, it's a great movie.
I got scarred.
My kids haven't
Now
seen
I'm
that one.
scared to go read Toriyama stuff if he
Oh
has
yeah, no, he
any
doesn't have anything to
connection
do.
to
No, he doesn't have anything to
the
do with that. But no,
But
like
he doesn't
you're
shy away
absolutely
from
right.
that type of humor either.
Yeah.
yeah.
The early Mario stuff, like yeah, all the design stuff and everything looks like it could have been, drawn by him. He was immensely influential in the video game industry. And he has this sort of chibi, like small, squat
Yeah.
SD, you think they used to call it, the super deformed
Yeah,
you know.
I was in a modeling store in Los Angeles the other day, and they had just a bunch of like World War One figures that he designed that were just like these big head, small bodied, like military soldiers that you could get a model kit of.
Very interesting.
So I found one thing last night when I was looking him up. I don't remember exactly what I was searching, but it fascinated me that because I think I was looking to see if he was doing the Dragon Ball, if he was still working on Dragon Ball, because I know there's still Dragon Ball Super and they're saying someone else was coming out with it. Because I was
Right.
wondering if it was like a Kentaro Miura situation where like, oh crap, he never finished it. And one fact that I really appreciated about him is they said that he claimed at least that one of the reasons he quit drawing manga is because he lost the nib holder that he'd had since he was 14, and he had drawn every book had been done with that, and he somehow lost it, and it was like, well, my magic pin's gone now, like I'm not doing
Bizarre.
it. But I thought, to me, that I found that to be very touching, because there's certain things that I have like that. Like I just had one bowl for many years that moved with me, and to hear an artist that's like that's the pin he had since he was 14.
He has such a distinctive line. I'm talking about his designs and stuff, but as far as like a pen and ink, artist is very, very like kind of singular. And there were some people who have obviously kind of like appropriated the general look of it. Specifically like One Piece has a lot of commonality with the early Toriyama stuff, but like he really did have this kind of like very blunt, rounded quality to everything that I thought was really characteristic.
Yeah, have you guys read Sandland? That's a really good book by
Yeah.
his as well.
Yeah, fantastic. It's his like
Oh.
2000, attempt at a second, third major serial.
Yeah, and I like it because if I remember right, it's just one single Takabon volume.
Right.
Just about the son of the devil and an old military veteran looking for water in a desert.
Yeah. And it was interesting having all this stuff sort of come out of sequence when it first started coming out. Like Viz, was, I think, probably inspired by the success of the anime to, release some of these things and get the license and everything. Although they had, and they actually came out backwards. So like Dragon Ball Z came out first, and then they went back and put out Dragon Ball in a certain kind of sense, and then Dr. Slump like 4 or 5 years later, after Sandland had come out concurrently with it being serialized in Japan.
Oh, certainly.
So it's an interesting way to kind of get somebody's stuff out of sequence like that, and just sort of realize that the person's reputation was completely different than what the actual reality of it when you got to see what they drew in the order that they drew it in.
But
Yeah,
that would explain why, like, my students, and I mean, I'm talking the entire time I've been teaching, going back to being a substitute teacher in 2007, that's all they talk about is Dragon Ball Z, because that would have been the first thing that they got, and then maybe retroactively gone backwards. And what you're describing about him seeming to be influenced by these reader polls and things, that means that the American audience would have been exposed to the thing that had been basically like refined and refined and refined by like pulling people into a room and crowdsourcing the movie.
Peak popularity. Yeah.
Yeah, like peak what the populace wants. That formula had been created through years of audience interaction. And so they're getting the purest injection of what 10-year-old boys want. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, it's a strange. It was making me think a lot. Both this and the Berserk artist and Mobius was all kind of making me think of like, you kind of get used to these amazing artists just kind of existing on the planet with you and putting out new things and everything. And it is always kind of a shock. You think of them as like a permanent fixture in the world.
Mm.
And I think for me, I used to pick on my friends a lot. I remember one of my old housemates when I lived in Seattle was really upset when the actor who played the Joker died. Batman.
Heath Ledger.
Yeah, and I was confused by it, and I just didn't understand. Like you don't know him, why do you care? And then remember when Mobius died was the first time that I was like, suddenly like, oh, I had such a connection to this person's work, and I expected them to kind of be around always. So it's a weird realization of kind of seeing externally other artists and how people react to them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I remember when Mobius died, there was a bunch of just like sad pictures of Blueberry, and like I remember kind of not wanting to like just not wanting to take part of that. Even I did a Mobius thing, and when Toriyama died, my first reaction was to just like I just drew a Goku picture in my sketchbook. So I was like, oh, that stuff's really important to me.
Well, let's see that sketchbook drawing, Brandon. You got that?
Oh, sure. Should I show you the original or just the Photoshop colored version?
Yeah, show us the color.
See both, yeah.
Both, yeah. Can you strip the color out in Photoshop?
Sure. Let's see. Before I'll dig out here's my very beat up sketchbook. The drawing I did in here.
Little baby Goku with his tail still.
Yeah, and then there's the Photoshop version.
It's I don't know why it never occurred to me that he would be an influence on you. I mean, he's got the clean line, he's got the humor, he's got the multilingual puns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know he's huge. I mean, I think he was kind of my introduction to manga. My older brother would and me would go to the Japanese grocery stores and get Shonen Jumps, like the mid '80s, and I think I posted when I posted this on Instagram. I talked about the first thing I saw by him was Goku fighting a demon on these giant stone statues' tongues. And when you saw a whole thing of the arena they were fighting in, you saw the statues were each sitting on toilets, and there was a giant stone toilet paper roll on the wall behind them, and they're just having a serious battle in front of that. And I remember just being like, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen at that point.
And you know what? You weren't wrong. You were not wrong.
Stone toilet paper is where it's at.
Well, I appreciate you guys, doing this with, talking about this, and I kind of gave the caveat at the beginning there. I'm not trying to eulogize someone or anything like that. It's just it feels like a good thing to mark somebody's passing, especially somebody who has been so significant and has made so much amazing work. And yeah, so get out there and buy every copy of Dr. Slump until Viz is forced to finally give justice to the people and have a Dr. Slump oversized perfect edition.
I would buy that. I would buy that, Viz. Yes, because obviously I need to fill in my gaps. So I will make the commitment now to I know Dragon Ball Z is probably not the best one for me to start with, but I have it in my house. And
that's a good start.
So that's my tribute is I will start there. But you put out the older work and I'll be all over it too.
Oh yeah, there's a collection of his short stories which is really fun too.
Almost got that, but yeah. I think
it's called Toriyama World or something. Tori World.
Yeah, we had seen that. But Jack wanted to do Dragon Ball Z Super rather than that. So
yeah, I do think it's one of those things that like I think once you really fall in love with his work, like if you read Dr. Slump and early Dragon Ball, then because I've gone through periods where Dragon Ball Z didn't connect with me, but then once I really connect with his work and I go back to it, there's things that like. I'm less into like the fight scenes, but there's still these like great storytelling things and really fun moments in it. Still, there's this whole kind of Terminator 2 future timeline that he does in it that's really fun. Where another fun thing is that he does a lot of very subtle puns in later Dragon Ball, like the character Bulma who shows up, her name's kind of a bastardization of bloomers. It's basically
like
underwear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then her son that shows up from the future, his name is Trunks.
Right.
Very serious, and he's like, it's like John Connor coming back, but his name is basically boxer shorts.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I very much look forward to it. Yeah, I think this is a good reason to start.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. All right, how many times can we say goodbye?
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.